welcome everybody. I'm Doug Marker, City Club President, and our program today is Lessons from Katrina, Disaster Recovery Planning for Portland. And with us we have Mike Maguire, Portland Fire and Rescue Deputy Chief, Ken Murphy, Deputy Director of Oregon's Office of Homeland Security, and Tom Simpson, Director of Emergency Management for Multnomah County. And our program today will be moderated by member Tom Cox. If you wouldn't mind, remember to turn off your cell phones and paging devices during the program. We'd appreciate that. And I have, as always, a few announcements to make. First of all, if you're noticing more new faces around City Club events, it's for good reason. More people are joining City Club. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've had 40 new members join the club. So, welcome to our new members, and thanks to our membership committee for spreading the word that City Club is the place for citizens to engage in Portland's public life. Next Friday, October 14th, our speaker will be former Governor John Kitzhaber. The program will be On the Road to Revolutions, Fear and Loathing in the U.S. Healthcare System. And on October 28th, our Friday forum will have Governor Ted Kulongoski, Growing Oregon's Economic Pie by Investing in Education. Members only may make advance reservations for the program, and in order to keep the check-in line as swift as possible, all lunch reservations must be paid in advance, and tickets for orders received before October 21st will be mailed. Lunch reservations open to the general public on October 21st. Other events around the club, our Citizens Read book club will meet on October 24th, and the book this month is Freakonomics, and there are copies for sale back at the registration table. In our theater series, Nixon's Nixon at Coho Theater on November 13th. October meetings of the issue committees are underway. The meeting schedules are in the bulletin and as always on our website, www.pdxcityclub.org. At this point, I'd like to make a special introduction of Craig Micken, founder and current City Club, our steering committee member of our sister City Club of Florence, for an announcement of the upcoming Heceta Head Coastal Conference. Craig?
Thank you. If you think the Pacific Ocean off the Oregon coast is an important natural resource, then you will love the Heceta Head Coastal Conference to be held in Florence on October 29th. It's a day-long conference, and you're all invited to attend. The idea for the conference began with the City Club of Florence. The mission of the City Club is to inform the members and the community in public matters and to arouse in them a realization of the obligations of citizenship. Now, if that strikes a familiar note to you, it was your bylaws 7 years ago that we stole and made the City Club of Florence bylaws. 19 were in attendance at that organizational meeting, at which the program by video was Strengthening the Fabric of Citizenship by Charles Hinkle. Thank you, City Club of Portland. We now have 90 members, and we average about 45 or 50 to our luncheon forums. But back to the conference. There are going to be outstanding marine experts presenting a program entitled Oregon's Ocean, Its Perils and Possibilities. 14 speakers will be divided into 4 panel sessions, and their lectures will be followed by questions from the audience. The topics will provide the latest facts on marine life off the Oregon coast and provide recent research results and prospects for a sustainable future. The list of speakers includes former members of the Pew Ocean Commission, the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy, professors of oceanic sciences, members of the fisheries industries, and so on. I'm going to be at the door at the close of the meeting and hand out brochures for those of you who would like to know the details. I will have to say that there is one errata on the program because it was printed a month ago, and that is that Governor Kulongoski will not appear, as has been previously intended, as a luncheon speaker. However, Secretary Bradley will be a luncheon speaker, and Senator Joanne Verger. We all invite you to come and share some interesting topics on the Oregon coast.
I want to mention our sponsors this quarter are Kaiser Permanente, Nike Incorporated, and they make the broadcast of City Club programs possible. So would you join me in thanking our sponsors? Well, to our program. Since the devastation of Hurricane Katrina, citizens around the country have had two responses in common. First, of course, finding ways to contribute to the care and recovery of victims and evacuees of the Gulf Coast. And then second, turning to their own communities and asking, what if it happened here? The answers have not been comforting. Recent news articles from Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C., and other areas found in their communities conflicting evacuation plans, lack of coordination across jurisdictions, and often little knowledge within the communities of what to do. In New Orleans, its own newspaper, the Times-Picayune, had published a chilling 4-part story predicting exactly how vulnerable that low-lying city was to flooding from a Category 4 hurricane. And yet, where the vulnerability and the specificity of likely damage was so well understood, the failure of government preparedness is now a national scandal. So what's the story here in Portland? Our program committee quickly organized today's panel to give our audience here in the Governor Hotel and on our television and radio broadcast the detail. The program will be moderated by member Tom Cox. Tom is perhaps best known for having run for governor in Oregon in 2002. He's been a member of the City Club for several years and a member of the program committee for 2 years. You may not know that in his long and varied career as a management consultant, he oversaw the creation of 24 disaster response plans for a state agency, and I hope those were coordinated plans, Tom. Tom also predicted to us that if he hosted this program, it might itself be a disaster, but we asked him anyway. So, thank you, Tom.
And thank you all very much. We've got not just 3 panelists here, we've got people all through the audience who are keenly and professionally interested in the subject of disaster planning and emergency response. And I can't mention all of them, but raise a hand if that's part of your job, is to be involved in disaster planning and response. You see quite a few. And the ones I was able to buttonhole on the way in include Lieutenant Colonel David Stuckey from the National Guard, who was in New Orleans for the month of September with the Oregon Guard contingent. Major Arnold Strong was hoping to join us. Mark Crosby from the Port of Portland was also in New Orleans. And Nan Newell is here from the Office of Public Health. If there are questions that these 3 panelists can't answer, there is someone in this audience who can do it. Our format today is going to be slightly different. Part of the meat and potatoes of disaster planning is the walkthrough. You don't know your plan's any good unless it is exercised. And so for the next 15 minutes, you're going to see a walkthrough. We are going to have a disaster right now. But first I'm going to introduce these guys. They thought they had a few more moments. I'll give it to them. Mike Maguire, Portland Fire and Rescue Deputy Chief. He's assigned to the Office of Emergency Management, holds a bachelor's degree in science in Fire Service Administration from Eastern Oregon University, and he's an instructor at the National Fire Academy at Portland Community College. Ken Murphy was appointed Deputy Director of Oregon's Office of Homeland Security on May 11th of last year, and was the Director of Oregon Emergency Management since April of 2003. He's been with emergency management since 1999 in various offices. He holds a bachelor's degree in management and communications from Concordia University and is a certified Oregon emergency management specialist. And Tom Simpson is the Director of Emergency Management for Multnomah County. He works closely with Chair Diane Lynn and emergency managers in 4 other counties and 5 cities. In his 18 years working in the public sector, Simpson has worked as a budget analyst, fiscal and computer services manager for the district attorney, and on and on. He holds a master's degree in public administration from Lewis and Clark College and a bachelor's from the University of Oregon. He's currently an adjunct professor of political science at George Fox University. And now on to the disaster. It is 2 p.m. on Tuesday, In March of 2009, a massive earthquake strikes Portland. Within 2 minutes, hundreds of buildings have collapsed, fires have started, the power is out, water mains are broken, and all land phones and cell phones have been knocked out. Gentlemen, starting with the city, then the county, then the state, give us in 60 seconds what you do in the first hour of your response. You'll notice they're scribbling because they didn't know what the scenario was going to be in advance. They never do.
Representing the city of Portland, I would just begin to say that our first responders would be very active in 60 seconds. They'd be first doing damage assessments to see if they can get out of their stations or where they are, just to survey the immediate area and start dealing with the emergencies that they're faced with. Could be the fires, again, you know, how do we deal with fires when the water system's down, all those pieces. But the immediate needs in the first 60 seconds is to do some damage assessments, do some very immediate triage of the neighborhoods, and find out what incidents we do have going, and then start prioritizing.
And during the first hour, tell us what the entire first hour.
During the first hour, again, these resources would be very busy. Our resources would be quickly overwhelmed, and what we'd be doing is the buildings that have collapsed, we have urban search and rescue teams in the area that would be dispatched to probably where we can do the most good. We may have to make some critical decisions, such as, do we have a building with one person in it, or do we have a building with 1,000 people in it? So we're going to have some critical decisions to make. As far as the fires, water systems out. City of Portland does have fire boats that we can lay fire hose from the river and pump into areas. Again, we're going to probably have to take a look at how we can do the most good. Resources and equipment are going to be very scarce, so we may have to let an area go to save a greater area. So those critical pieces are going to be there. Again, the damage assessments are going to be critical. You know, what is standing? What emergency transportation routes do we have available? How are the hospitals? And all those questions we're going to try to find some immediate answers to. It's going to be very difficult without communications. Cell phones, normal landlines are down. Is our 800 system for radios working? You know, what systems do we have? So we'd have to make some determinations there and start prioritizing.
Thank you. Now, the county's first hour response, Mr. Simpson.
What we would do primarily is, one of the first things I'm going to be trying to do, assuming I'm alive, of course, is getting the situational awareness. Is what is going on out there? What is happening? How bad is it? What's the extent of it? Where does it go? Where does it come? How far out does it go? Because there are parts of this region that may not be affected, and I will try desperately to get a hold of them first. So, for example, if Hillsborough is fine or if Gresham is fine, they're going to have resources that will be available to the areas that are struck. Within the county government, obviously, we have control over 5 of the downtown bridges. Our bridge crews will be out, assuming they can get out, they'll be out assessing those bridges to see how damaged they are. Typically, what happens in this kind of incident, they put those things up right away so they're not stuck in the down position. That may seem counterintuitive, but that's how maritime works, is you have to keep the rivers open. So they're going to get those things up first and then see if they can get them back down, make sure they're operational. Mike mentioned emergency transportation routes. The emergency managers in this region have put together regional emergency transportation routes. These are a prioritized set of roads that are going to be cleared first. And so our transportation department will be out clearing their roads, the ones that are assigned to them first. And the reason that's important is because those roads are critical for moving emergency equipment and people around. Obviously, our health department is going to be activated very quickly so they can coordinate with the regional hospital as well as the local hospitals and the EMS system.
Thank you. And what is the state doing for the first hour?
In the first hour, I will immediately call the governor and 2 things, let him know and make sure he's all right. And then the second piece is to call my office and, number 1, head to it. Assuming I'm not in it, I could be in it. It's 2 p.m. on Tuesday. If I'm not there, I'll call in and give some instructions. If I am there, I probably will immediately determine what communication systems we have up, and then have our engineer that's on staff, if that person is there, start doing an inspection of our facility that we work in. And at the same time, the Oregon Emergency Response System will call out to the 26 state agencies that we normally deal with in any emergency. I will ask them to bring in personnel and determine the status of the personnel. if their employees are victims or they don't know the status of their families, and determine what type of workforce do we have available, and at the same time tell the state agencies to bring together all of their resources. And then the third piece in that first hour then would be to notify the Federal Emergency Management Agency and to notify our contiguous states and all the counties in the state of Oregon and invoke the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, which I can do without a governor's declaration, give them a warning order to be prepared to immediately bring to bear those necessities such as food, water, and sheltering type equipment, and then go ahead and get as many architects and building inspectors and road inspectors that I can get from anywhere in the country, because one of the first things we'll have to do is determine what shape the infrastructure is in.
Thank you. That's the first hour. It is now 3 p.m., 1 hour after the initial earthquake. Your satellite phones and all two-way radios suddenly stop working. They won't transmit, and all they seem able to receive is some sort of Arabian horse show. Briefly, how do you handle the communications outage?
We do have redundancies in our communication plan. We do have ham radio operators that are going to be key to any disasters we saw in Katrina. The ham radio systems were probably one of the best ways to get information to other areas to call for resources, so those are very active. The second hour also, we would be, wouldn't be waiting for the second hour, but we'd be activating our Emergency Operations Center to start declaring disaster declarations. As Ken said, we're not going to wait for somebody to sign something. We're going to be pulling the triggers and getting together and making sure this works, because some of the formal process, we don't know who's going to be around. We're going to continue with damage assessments, but the communication piece is always a problem. And so, again, we're going to be going to probably the most basic level. Now, if that breaks next, then we're probably going to be doing a lot of yelling and 3x5 cards with runners.
Same question to you.
Same question. One of the things they did find in the South is that the internet survived while most landlines and cell towers went down. In fact, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal just recently about that. So one of the things we are looking at is voice over IP technology, and one of the things we'd want to check out first is that up? Is that system still up and operational? Even though the things through the air may be down, the internet may still be up. We have already mapped internet hotspots throughout the entire city, and we have that map available to us in our EOC. Just in case our wide area network goes down, we can actually go outside and get that. There are volunteer groups in this community, things like Portland Telco Project, that are putting up free hotspots throughout this region. And those are the kind of folks that would probably mobilize fairly quickly to start putting up large webs of wireless connection points throughout the region. So I would rely on them especially. And quite frankly, if all of my comms are down, I'm going to do what I can best do to get to the city, to get to the physical location of my partners in this, and I will drive out to the city's EOC if I have to, or get there somehow, so that we can be in close proximity. We can be next to each other so we don't have to rely on those.
For the state, if communications, two-way radios, and cell phones and that down, one of the first things that I will ask for is the communications capabilities out of the National Guard. And then I will also send out information to our neighboring states if I can get in touch with them. And we have an alternate emergency operations center in Washington and Idaho that can back up Oregon, like Oregon can back up those two states, and use them as a focal point. And as each one of my colleagues said, we have a very robust amateur radio system in the state of Oregon. And then also at the state level, I would invoke the ability to control law enforcement at the state level and the Oregon Department of Transportation, because each one of their vehicles is a mobile communications platform, and try and move those around to the right places to provide the most good to support the county and the city. And also, at that point in time, we would start to do damage assessments outside of the greater Portland area to determine what effects are in the rest of the state.
Thank you. It is now 4 p.m., 2 hours after the initial quake. You have received confirmation that every single bridge across both the Willamette and the Columbia Rivers is either down or so damaged you don't dare use it. Mayor Potter, facing uncontrollable fires in downtown, orders an evacuation. How do you manage it?
Well, I would say that the evacuation is probably well underway at this point. People aren't going to wait around in that case, so they're going to probably be, with the advent of the roads being closed, they're probably going to be walking out. So we're going to have to start getting some information out to where we would like people to assemble. We're still going to be able to respond because we do have responders geographically located throughout our area on both sides of the river, so it's going to be coordinated efforts. One of the key things that we do have that's very unique in our area is the neighborhood emergency teams. And these teams are made up of volunteers that are well trained that can go out and do damage assessments and take care of things in their own areas. So that's going to be a key piece of not only getting information, but probably also coordinating some of the evacuations that we do have, because they are set up with ham radios and we can communicate with them. So we'll be coordinating that information, trying to tell people where to go. But again, we need to know what is the condition of the other areas, because we don't want to send somebody to another area that's experienced heavy damage. They're doing the same thing. So again, it's a lot of information that needs to be passed. It's going to be difficult, but we do have some redundant systems.
And you've rehearsed these, of course.
Pardon me?
And you've rehearsed these.
We actually do train on many of these events, and so the ham radio systems do get together and talk, and we're in the process of doing some evacuation. One of the things that we did see was the need for a very comprehensive evacuation plan, and so we're taking a look at how best to do that.
Excellent. It is now the second day. 1 day has elapsed since the earthquake. Tabletop exercises are notoriously unpleasant and unfair. It's about to get a lot worse. We jump forward now. The satellite phones and two-way radios are now working again. No other phones yet work. At noon on the first day afterwards, you are told of a massive explosion at Emmanuel Hospital. Soon after that, you are informed that there is, quote, measurable radiation, unquote, and your experts fear it is a dirty bomb planted by terrorists. How do you respond?
Well, we're going to be sending resources there. One of the nice things for this is, boy, how do you dream these up?
I'm a very, very bad man.
Okay. Well, our first responders are equipped with radiation detection systems. We do have a Geiger counter type on our fire apparatus, and law enforcement do carry that. So we should be able to determine anytime there's an explosion, it does kind of raise some red flags, like maybe this is a terrorist type of event. So we would certainly want our responders to be checking that area. Again, hospital, you know, what situations do we have at the hospital? We want to ascertain and set up kind of the hot zone around this to make sure that we don't contaminate any more people, but yet we've got a need to rescue people. So at the second day, we're well hoping that our national resources that Ken procured the first day are well on the way to start helping us with that. But we're going to look at saving as many lives as we can and saving the lives of the responders, and again, determining the area that needs evacuation if it is contaminated with radioactivity.
And does the county have anything to add to that?
The only piece that I would add is that our health department is active with what's called a health preparedness organization, and that's I'm going to get the number wrong, six counties region, and they're going to be, from the get-go, they will have already started that communications plan working through that. So they're going to be, at least their awareness of where they can move people to if necessary, which hospitals would be back up, those kinds of things would already be well in place at this point.
And would the state have any additional response in the event of a dirty bomb?
Yeah, since the potential is there that it's a suspected terrorist event, that actually changes things. The FBI would be in the area, depending on if they're alive or not after it, but there would be FBI coming in from out of state probably, and I would also then, and I waited 18 months to say this, I'd call the Oregon National Guard Civil Support Team that's just been recently certified, and they're trained in how to handle these matters to help first responders, and simply because the first responders just simply may be spread too thin. And then also at this point in time, I would again notify our neighboring states to notify their law enforcement because you never know the potential of that terrorist event spreading to another state, and then notify the Department of Homeland Security, and they have numerous issues that they can invoke to bring to bear resources from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to help us deal with the potential nuclear event.
Excellent. It is now the third day of the walkthrough. 2 days have elapsed since the earthquake. Outlying hospitals begin to report a virulent flu is spreading through the crowded hospitals and refugee camps. I told you I'm not fair. Tests reveal it is the avian flu. You must contain the outbreak. What do you do?
Well, I'm going to refer this one to Multnomah County, actually, because they are the lead agency. However, what we would hope is many people have already evacuated the area, and we'd probably start looking at doing some isolation and, taking measures to prevent any spread of any type of pandemic type of disease or anything like that. So that's where we would be doing, and the City of Portland would be helping Multnomah County, working with the other agencies to number one, vaccinate responders so they can continue to do the works and their families so they don't take it home to them, and then probably setting up points of distribution so that we can do mass prophylaxis.
We're actually in the process of exercising this very scenario, except without the earthquake and the dirty bomb. But there is a strategic national pharmaceutical stockpile that is going to be exercised in November for the entire state of Oregon. And so this is something that our health departments and our hospitals will have drilled on, actually, on November 3rd. They will have drilled on this, about how to set up these points of distribution, like Mike has said, throughout the state, how to inoculate the entire state, not just this region. And this is something that the health departments have drilled on, how to set up these clinics and move people through very, very quickly. And again, as I said, they're going to be probably calling in the strategic national pharmaceutical stockpile in some kind of capacity.
Timely subject, Tom. Bringing in such a thing as the avian flu, and I don't know how much anybody in the audience, is knowledgeable of the actual details, but this changes the dynamics. I would, at this point, if I had a confirmation, I would be calling my friend Nan Newell at State Public Health and getting some recommendations, and I would probably recommend to the governor that we stop the influx of materials from all over the United States in to help the area. Just because of the potential of this particular pandemic spreading. And then also notify our contiguous states, all the rest of the counties in the state, and then look at our plans about how do you shut down the entire border of Oregon, any possible mode of transportation, rail, bus, air, car, or by sea, and how do you shut that down for the potential spread.
And I did knock down the bridges for you, so you're one up on that. Well, that concludes the walkthrough. We've hit you with natural disaster, disease, terror attack, and systems breakdown. And you guys have worked together before, I guess. I know that they do about 30 walkthroughs a year, each of them. Nice stuff, folks. Now, we've got some prepared questions, but I asked you each to come up with about 3 to 5 minutes of prepared remarks on what you see. What did I not ask you about? What's especially working well? What's especially in need of our attention as a community in improving disaster response? And so if, Mike, if you'd come up to the podium and grace us with your remarks.
Just a couple of things that I think are very unique that have really emerged in our area. That we have watched Katrina and Rita, and it's really brought to our attention that no one single agency can handle the type of disasters that we can be dealt with, just like the one we just had, and just what we've watched in the Gulf Coast. So it's absolutely essential that we rely on partnerships to deal with disasters, partnerships in different disciplines such as law enforcement, fire, public works, medical, all these things we need to work together. And one of the things that I've noticed in my career is it's the relationships you build ahead of time that are going to be key in the time of disaster, because it is chaos, and it's nice to know, like I say, I work with Tom and Ken on a number of things, and there's no given that we're all going to be there, but we're not going to wait for some formal peace. We're going to make things happen. With that said, I want to talk about these partnerships, and it's not just at the response end. We have agreements for responding. We have agencies that respond together and work together in different situations, but it's also about planning. Planning and mitigation are very important, that we do things the same way, that we plan on mitigation efforts that may not just include the city of Portland, but they also encumber into Multnomah County. Also about management. How do we deal with these disasters? We work together. We've taken the egos out of these things for the most part years ago, and we focus on setting goals. We set goals for how we're going to deal with these disasters, and we follow those goals. Whenever there's a doubt, we can refer back to the goal. Training and exercises, we talked about that a little bit. We do this basically year-round. All the disciplines, all the agencies do this. And it's not enough to just do it by yourself. You need to do it together so you can find out those little intricacies like communications and different things like that ahead of time. One of the things that our area has been very fortunate to have is UASI. That's the Urban Area Security Initiative, and basically that's federal grants through DHS that have been put together so that we can help our communities respond to, prepare, prevent, and recover from a terrorism type of event. We've kind of taken a unique approach that we actually included more areas than DHS originally set forth. We included Clackamas and Columbia County along with, Clackamas and Clark County along with Columbia, Multnomah, and Washington County. So we included a bigger group because that's the metro area, and anything unique to the metro area isn't just going to stop at those county lines. We've also had the ability to talk about this and set some strategies before we just went blindly spent money. Strategies came up and it was determined, the likelihood of a terrorism event in this area, it may or may not be very high, but the likelihood of a natural disaster is always present. So we took on the challenge of developing our plans so that there were a concept of operation that could deal with a variety of both man-made and natural disasters. So it's a kind of a template that we can use for anything. So it really does work well. And then again, this regionalization and coordination, we all work together. There's a lot of familiar faces out here, and we're going to rely on each other to help. Some of the gaps that we did find, we actually tested some of these concepts of operation during Katrina, and we had a lot of ability to try some of the things, and we found they did work. We do have gaps. We don't have formal agreements in some of the things, but again, I can assure you, we're not going to wait for a formal agreement when there's a disaster. We're going to make things happen. Command of an area event. Who's in charge? We've got a concept that allows the incident to always start locally, and it expands beyond geographical areas or jurisdictions. Who's going to be in charge? Maybe the city of Portland. It might also include Multnomah County and then on to the state. For instance, in the Operation Welcome Oregon that we referred to, Ken Murphy in the state of Oregon was the lead agency. However, it was a Portland-Multnomah County event, so again, Tom and I just jumped in and we made things happen. Again, no ego, but we knew clearly this was a state event. We unified, we got together, and Tom was talking about we're going to get to our operations center. We live a little bit out, but we both determined, hey, we can get there by kayak, swimming, hiking, over whatever's left. We'll get there. Some of the things, plans also, we have a variety of plans. You can see some of those behind us. They're very, very good. We test those plans all the time. We've got an opportunity to test it at a large event, Top Off. You might hear something about that, but it's a DHS-sponsored event, and it's going to be there. Probably the most important thing is our citizens. The community just came out and wanted to help. We do have a structure, the Citizen Corps, that's there to help communities prepare for disaster and take care of people. That includes the neighborhood emergency teams, neighborhood watches, and it's a great backbone for volunteer efforts. We certainly had more of the informal requests that people showing up and wanting to help. So we're currently looking, one of the gaps that we have is how do we integrate emergent volunteers? So we're looking at using our neighborhoods, and when somebody shows up to help, we want to put them to work. Everybody wants to help, and we don't want to turn anybody away. So those are some of the big things that we learned, how to manage volunteers. We're still working on that, and the preparedness. It's all up to you.
Thank you, Mike. And because we're running low on time, Tom and Ken, I'm stealing from you a few minutes if you can be very brief.
I will be very brief. There's many things that keep me awake at night on this. Let me just cover on two of them. The first questions I ask myself are, am I clear of my own ego? Am I replaceable? What do I have in here that somebody else may need? Because I may not be able to get to the incident. Now, if you have teenagers, you know what's in here. They know what's not here, and it's nothing. But there might be just something that I've been working on that someone else needs in my emergency. So what don't I know? What are the things that I don't know that I need to know? What haven't I planned for, and who haven't I engaged in this work that I'm doing? And finally, on citizen preparedness, we saw during Katrina what happens to the most vulnerable. The poor, the homeless, the non-English speaking, the developmentally disabled, the mentally ill. Multnomah County tends to care for these people on a daily basis. And we ask ourselves continually, how do we get to those folks? I would venture to guess that a small percentage of you already have a 3-day kit at your house. I can guarantee you none of these people do. How do we protect them? How do we prepare them? How do we get to them? That's what keeps me awake at night.
Thank you, Tom. Ken?
Well, they said much everything, so my time is really simple, but I will tell you just a couple things, and Mike mentioned it. Mike, in Operation Welcome Oregon, none of the three of us did anything without talking. So, that's part of the key is working. But the gentleman from Florence mentioned citizenship, and Mike and Tom mentioned it. That's what we need the most of, really. We need your citizenship to be prepared personally and to prepare your family. And an interesting article in the Oregonian here a couple of weeks ago by one of the editorial board writers, couldn't really get around having her own 72-hour kit, but you could probably have one for her neighbor. So, take care of your family, your neighborhoods, because there's not enough police, there's not enough fire, there's not enough of everything, so we're gonna have to help each other. And take the time to get involved. Take the time to learn about your city, your county, your state, and step up to the plate and help out in those areas. And then I think, too, one things that I know my colleagues and I suffer, and I think a few people that I recognize out there, don't let these events slip away only because they're in your view right now. When we go back to whatever normal is anymore, and there's not people being hurt or killed or their homes destroyed by an event, keep these kind of things in your mind, and take those extra few steps to help yourself, your family, and your community and your state. So thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, all three of you. You've answered several of the questions that I'd prepared for this portion, and in just a few minutes we'll go to audience questions as well. So, very quickly, and I know this is a big question, and I'm asking for a brief answer, what role does FEMA play in each of your plans, and when do you expect them to play it?
They just all diverted it to me. Very quick answer. First of all, I want to be very truthful and make sure you don't get misperception of what you've seen in the last 60 days. FEMA, the cavalry, whatever you want to call it, they're not sitting in the Idaho border waiting with trucks full of food and water. Two, we don't have 72 hours notice in most of our events, like a hurricane. So FEMA, we have regional FEMA offices that do have some pre-positioned equipment, but most importantly, they have pre-positioned contracts. And so one of my first phone calls, probably the second call after the governor, is to FEMA. And like Mike and Thomas said, I'm not going to wait for paperwork. And FEMA won't either if you know how to work with them properly. That stuff will start rolling here immediately, because once they know that it's a severe earthquake in this particular scenario, there's no hesitation from the FEMA folks that we work with in this region to bring to bear all the services that they have here.
Excellent. How is DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, interfacing with each of you? What support has it given you compared to the support you think it ought to be giving you?
I'll jump right in.
Yeah, why don't you? I might say something.
Department of Homeland Security, clearly after the terrorist events that have taken place in our country, there is no doubt in my mind that Homeland Security needs to be there and provide the resources and the support to our nation and to our communities here to better prepare us for terrorism. I think Homeland Security is maturing and still needs to have a better appreciation and understanding that one of our terms of endearment in our business is all hazards planning. And we need to plan for terrorism, but in all honesty, most terrorist events, no matter what causes them or what happens, we would still respond and deal with them the same way we would a natural disaster. And we want to work with our Homeland Security partners to keep them focused on that simple point so that we can make better use of our federal dollars.
Thank you. We saw in Katrina an entire assisted living facility inundated and its residents drowned. Who is responsible for seeing that that sort of thing doesn't happen here, and how are they going to do it?
I think it's up to all of us to make sure that that doesn't happen here. It's just not one person. I mean, I've actually talked to Mayor Potter, who's a very strong advocate of preparedness, about that. We don't want that to happen in our city, so we're talking about working with the state to develop codes so that if you're operating an assisted living facility, you may have to have generators, you may have to have evacuation plans, and those things in place. You just can't put people there and with no recourse to save them. So again, we'd work with the state to enact codes, and we can do some of those things in our local area as well. Very important.
Just to pitch in there, one of the things we can't do in an emergency is control people's behavior, and that may seem self-evident, but you saw what happened in the South. I've had people tell me that if there's some nasty bug that breaks out in this region, they're out of here. It doesn't matter what their role is supposed to be, they're out of here. And I wish that wasn't so, but no matter wishing will make it different. So what can we put in place then? I think Mike's touching on it. What can we put into place that requires people to be prepared when they have the care of someone else in their hands? And that's really what the issue is here. Is if you have some kind of care over someone else, what can we basically mandate you to do? We want to use that tool very carefully, but what can we mandate you to do to help to better prepare yourself and your facility in such an emergency?
Thank you. Many of the average folks down in New Orleans explicitly said that they weren't going to evacuate in advance despite having advance notice. They said they believed that if things got bad, quote, someone would come rescue us, unquote. When is that an appropriate attitude? When should citizens hunker down and be essentially passive?
I think that they learned that it's going to take a while for the responders to reach them to do the rescue. It's a good lesson for everybody to take evacuation notices very seriously, and when you get that warning, move on it.
Let me add a different perspective to that, Tom, a little bit, about hunkering down. We talked about our earthquake scenario. Those are the times maybe that, if you do what you're supposed to, drop, cover, and hold, you have your 72-hour kit, your family is prepared, those are the times, when it's not wise to evacuate. And considering how many unreinforced masonry buildings we have in the greater Portland metropolitan area, chances are if you did try and leave your home, you'd be killed by falling brick. So, and that's one of the messages, that we get out to people so that they don't self-evacuate.
And one other thing I want to add is this really it makes us think of what public message are we sending out to the public. Because you could have one jurisdiction say, run, hide. You could have another one say, stay. And so that the critical nature of what we call a joint information center, common public messaging. I see Mike Pullins here from our public affairs office. Mike and his fellow public information officers have really tried to drill this in this region. And we have some practice with it. With St. Helens, when it blew, public information officers came from a variety of agencies and worked on a common message. What should you do if the ash comes falling down? This is no different. We would want to make sure that the message is clear, that if there are areas that we believe need to evacuate, that those specific areas get that message, if it's door-to-door communication or if it's through the airwaves. So again, that common message, getting that common message out is going to be real critical.
Thank you. We are now at the time in the program when we move to open questions from the floor, and the first question is always from the board host. Today it's from Gwen Milius. Guinevere Milius, Governor and New Leaders Council Liaison, is a partner with Stevie Royce Milius, an architecture, interiors, and marketing firm. Her background includes marketing professional services and freelance writing. Ms. Milius holds a bachelor's degree in women's studies and French from Pomona College. She's a founding co-chair of the City Club's New Leaders Council, and Ms. Milius has been a member of City Club since 1996. Gwen Milius.
Actually, the founding past co-chair, to give my new co-chairs their props. I have so many questions to ask you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your presentation today. I'm going to focus on physical infrastructure since I have the architecture background. I'm wondering if you have been able to identify particular weaknesses in the Portland metro area's physical infrastructure. We mentioned that the water is gone in our tabletop scenario today. Bridges may or may not work. Where are our greatest weaknesses, and what are we doing to fix them?
I mean, I think if I was going to look at what our levee was, because that was the physical piece down there, I would have to say it's probably the bridges. We've got, it's a known device. No one's walking across that one unless, of course, it fills up with something. So the key there is how are we going to get people and equipment across that. And quite frankly, we have a number of bridges that we already know one which will drop. The Selwood Bridge is already under load restrictions. A number of other ones may not be passable. So what have we done to fix our bridges? I know the state of Oregon has put some bond money into trying to fix the state's bridges, but we have critical pieces in downtown Portland that will fail and are likely to fail. So I would put that one right up there at the top of the list.
I would agree with Tom on the bridges, but I would also add to that, we try and look at strategically what's important to look at in case a disaster happens. We've got bridges, the road networks. I think also I worry Portland Airport sets below water level, and we've had some recent experience what happens below water level, and so I would be very concerned about those kind of structural issues. In fact, anything along the Columbia River, I think, could potentially be in trouble dependent upon that. So, you look at some strategic value to certain things like airports and bridges that, you really want to focus in on. And then I think so, too, I would just add that the state is, thanks to Senator Courtney in this last legislative session, we're slowly, not as quick as I'd like, moving towards earthquake retrofitting of schools, hospitals, police departments, and fire departments, and hopefully in this next session we'll get the bonding to do it.
I think my issues would be the communications pieces at large. We have these very sophisticated communication systems that seem to always fail. So what's our redundancies? The other issues that I would have is, for the city of Portland particularly and the whole area, where are we going to shelter mass numbers of people? Where are we going to get the resources to give them food and water to take care of them? If everything is down, how are we going to do those things? So those are the challenges that we all have, not just us three, but we all have.
Thank you. I remind you that asking a question is a privilege of City Club membership, and there are membership forms in the back. So don't feel shy about coming on up. Go ahead with your question, sir.
Yeah, Kurt Wabering, member. If I may, even two quick questions. In New York, at 9/11, the police and the fire were not on the same radio frequency, so my question is about that. The other one is in Baghdad and again in New Orleans, there was a collapse of civil order and outbreak of looting, and what's your thinking around that?
Well, I can speak for the city of Portland, and virtually the whole area, we operate on an 800 megahertz system. We have common channels between fire and police and public works agencies so we can all talk together. We can talk with the state, so we have the ability to do those things. The challenge back there was why they didn't use them. We actually use and practice those things and can do that. As far as the civil unrest piece, I know I've had that discussion with Portland Police at Mayor Potter's request that we don't want anything like that to happen in our community. So we've been assured that we would get people in place. immediately. We'd be looking at Ken and Tom both to provide resources. The National Guard is going to be a key resource for us to keep civil order.
There's on the radio frequency piece, there's another way to look at it as well. The way I've looked at it is that I can't control the radio frequencies that people are using, in a sense that I can't mandate that from the county emergency management standpoint. And there's probably, I don't know, a dozen different types of radios that are being used during an incident. And I won't be able to mandate that. But what can I do? How can I get those radios to talk to each other so that people can do that? And we're looking at a technology called radio over IP. It's being used in different jurisdictions. And there's also other technologies. There's one, it's called an ACU 1000. It's a crossband repeater. Those are technical terms, but what they allow for is different brand, and not only brands, but different types of radios to communicate with one another. And so we're trying to solve, some of it is a procedural issue, get them on the same radios. But that's very difficult sometimes because there's millions of dollars of infrastructure supporting those. So what's the other piece? The other piece is how can we get those technology to talk to each other?
And even more important than that is the radios don't necessarily have to talk to each other, but the people do. They have to have a common set of operational goals and objectives set, and that's why we use unified command. That's why we all work together.
I would encourage folks to form a single line at the microphone. I know folks have been assembling slowly, and choosing the order will be up to you.
Justin Doon, City Club. A few years ago, the engineers in the Portland and state of Oregon did an analysis of what the effect of a massive earthquake would be on the city, determined that there could be easily 10,000 to 15,000 fatalities as downtown buildings collapsed. Recently, Portland's hospitals clarified that they could deal with a maximum of 200 critical cases simultaneously. Two questions. What would we do about getting people out of the rubble of downtown? And two, what would we do about getting them critical medical services?
Well, getting them out of the buildings, we'd use our urban search and rescue teams, heavy rescue equipment to do that. As far as the the surge capabilities, again, we'd be working, what routes do we have to get people out? What resources do we have? We have the ability to set up medical care points, or basically a field hospital type of situation in geographic areas that we could more easily take people to and have a very temporary type of a medical care point. So that might be one part there.
Just one thing that happens in just about every disaster, but especially earthquakes, when we have these type events, and don't quote me on this, I think there's about 27 federalized urban search and rescue teams, and they will automatically be brought in. And also when you have mass casualty incidents, the same thing, we have disaster medical assistance teams that are federalized across the country, as we see in New Orleans and Louisiana right now, and they would all be headed in here. That's why the airport's so critical. But we would bring them into other airports if necessary to bolster the urban search and rescue and the medical capabilities of this general region.
Claire Corwin-Kordowski, a City Club member, and I have a question for Mike Maguire. How often are the neighborhood emergency team trainings and ham radio trainings, and where are they, and do you know when the next ones will occur?
Absolutely. We do neighborhood emergency team training, typically, I believe, about twice a year. I know our next training is set for early winter, and they typically are done out at the Fire Bureau's Training Center on 122nd and Sandy. If you'd like to look on Portland Online, you can go to the Fire Bureau's website, or you can go to the Portland Emergency Management website, and it'll provide some information on where you can, on the teams itself and how they operate, and then there's a phone number that you can actually call, 823-4614.
Also, is Rachel Jackie in the audience? Did Rachel make it? No. Rachel Jackie is the coordinator for the neighborhood emergency team, so you want to call that number and ask for her.
Susan Pierce, member. In the event of the collapse of all the bridges or that they're not functioning, what conversations have been had with boat owners about providing transportation across the river? Is the Portland Spirit going to be chugging back and forth? Is that an option?
Actually, I know in the past there has been conversations with the trolley that goes across and some of the boat owners, and again, it'd be depending on the time and the access to it, but I know in the past that prior to my involvement with emergency management, there was those discussions about how we could ferry and shuttle people and equipment using the military as well. So those discussions have been in place, and again, I'm not up to date on the latest part of that, but I know they have had discussions in the past.
Let me add one thing to that. All over Oregon, the county emergency managers and the city emergency managers, they're doing work, but a lot of things we do can support the whole state and to help. We just recently, thanks to the great efforts of Commissioner Terry Thompson in Lincoln County and Jim Hawley, the Lincoln County emergency manager, have signed a tentative agreement with the fishing fleet out of Newport. And that's something that could come to Portland. And I have never been on one of those big boats, and it's just absolutely amazing how much food, fuel, computers, cranes, tools are there. So I think we've got a great resource that could help us out.
I did hear a phone call that came into our office. I didn't take it, but I understand there's some efforts to bring an aircraft carrier to our city for display, and somebody said, well, they could just move that upriver and turn it sideways and take care of a bridge.
Carla Kelly, City Club member. You've talked about communications between emergency organizations. If one of these disasters happens and my normal channels of receiving information as a citizen are gone, and I'm at my home, which happens to be in the city of Portland, but in an unincorporated area of Washington County, and I have no idea who my neighborhood coordinator is or whether there is such a person, how am I going to know whether I'm supposed to go or stay and in which direction I'm supposed to go if I'm supposed to leave?
One of the big pieces of a disaster kit includes a transistor radio, and that's a good way to get public information out if all else fails. Typically those can be back online. And again, it's probably going to be a lot of individual working around in neighborhoods to get information out.
We've got time for one more question before the end of our formal program. Go ahead.
Thank you. Miki Blizzard, a City Club member. What are your provisions for providing redundant transportation systems for evacuation or even just for moving around the city? And not only in terms of transportation, but in terms of the previous question, how can some of this information get out to the public before these events come up? What kind of effort is being made to kind of put it into our consciousness long term, whether there's signage about evacuation or assembly points or kind of periodically what you do, whether it's helping kids in school understand that or at workplace?
Go ahead.
I think there's the trouble with too much information about here's how you prepare for this, here's what you should do about this case, here's when you do this, is it confuses the public. What we're trying to do more than anything is that basic level of preparedness about a 72-hour kit that you need to have to prepare your family. If people would just do that, we would have far fewer victims. And so I really want to keep the message simple to the public. There will be other pieces, other details that will come out during an emergency. But I really want to focus on the fact that individuals and families and neighborhoods can be prepared better than they currently are, and that's a fairly simple message to get out. So I don't mean to dodge it, but at the same time, I want to be realistic here that it gets confusing to the public. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? I want to keep it simple.
I think another part of that is we watch the incidents in the Gulf Coast, and we realize there is a need for a comprehensive evacuation plan. My understanding is I'm not aware of any mass evacuation of the city, but we are going to undertake that effort and start preparing a comprehensive plan. Again, we aren't typically going to get the warning, so we're looking at putting together some type of a template. Here's a plan for an earthquake. Here's a plan for a flood. Here's a plan for a windstorm or a volcano, and it's going to have to go from the basics of a walkout plan to a transportation plan, and we're going to be working with all the stakeholders that are involved. Where are we going to take people? And it's going to be beyond the city of Portland, so we're going to have to work with all the counties. So we are working on those pieces and trying to include every aspect we can put together.
Well, I am very impressed. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation today and participating with us. And Tom, you are a very scary man. Thank you for moderating and thank you for putting together this program. We're adjourned.